In a fast-growing city on the East Coast, Pastor David was seen as a beacon of faith. He led one of the biggest churches in the area. Every Sunday, the building overflowed with worshipers, some even standing outside just to hear his voice over the loudspeakers. On stage, he was charismatic, polished, and deeply convincing. People called him a man after God's own heart, and believed his prayers healed the sick. But behind closed doors, David lived a lie. He used his power to control vulnerable women in his congregation, twisting their trust for his own selfish gain. To the world, he wore a smile and spoke of salvation. But to those who got too close, he was a predator cloaked in Scripture. No one suspected that the same hands that baptized believers were hiding unholy sins that would one day come to light. Lydia walked into Kingdom Life Church with calm confidence and a clean resume. Pastor David personally approved her as the new church secretary, impressed by her composure and professionalism. What he didn't know was that Lydia wasn't there just for a paycheck. She had a mission. Years earlier, her younger sister had been one of David's victims. She had trusted him, followed his guidance, and ended up shattered, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. That trauma sent her down a spiral that ended in a hospital bed and an HIV diagnosis. Lydia now carried the same burden. Though she never told anyone, she had tested positive months ago. But instead of letting it break her, she let it sharpen her focus. Every day she walked into that church, she did it with a smile and a secret plan, to make Pastor David pay, slowly, quietly, and from the inside. As the days passed, Pastor David's behavior toward Lydia shifted. What started as professional interaction soon blurred into something more personal. He would often invite her into his office for mentorship sessions, where he praised her work but subtly pushed her boundaries. His compliments were frequent, and his questions became intrusive. At first, Lydia played along, maintaining a respectful and attentive demeanor. She knew he was trying to manipulate her, testing how far he could go without raising suspicion. Lydia had a plan, and she needed him to fall deeper into his own trap. He thought he had power over her, that she was just another impressionable young woman eager for his guidance. But Lydia wasn't playing the role of a naive secretary. Every smile, every lingering touch, every moment of trust, she absorbed it all, calculating her next move with cold precision. Pastor David's demands grew more frequent and personal. What started as occasional one-on-one meetings turned into almost daily private sessions behind closed doors. He would claim it was for spiritual guidance or church matters, but Lydia knew better. Each meeting felt like another step deeper into his control, a web she couldn't easily escape. Pastor David's charisma and power over the congregation made him untouchable, and Lydia understood that. Though she felt disgusted by his manipulative tactics and hidden desires, she had no choice but to play along. She kept her emotions buried, offering nothing but compliant smiles and polite conversation. Beneath her calm exterior, a storm raged. Lydia wasn't submitting, she was observing, biding her time. Every word, every move from Pastor David was part of the plan she'd crafted in the silence of her own mind. The trap was set, and she was waiting for the perfect moment. Lydia's patience finally paid off when Pastor David crossed a line, asking for more than just a private meeting. He offered her his charm, pretending to care, to draw her into a physical relationship. He didn't realize that Lydia was no longer the innocent church secretary he thought she was. Every kiss, every touch, every moment was calculated. She played the role of the willing participant, all the while masking her true feelings. The act wasn't out of desire, it was an act of revenge. Lydia had a mission to complete, and this was a calculated move in her plan. Unbeknownst to Pastor David, she harbored the virus that had destroyed her sister's life, and now, she was preparing to deliver it. The emotional turmoil she felt was overshadowed by the cold resolve she had built up over the past few months. The revenge had begun. It didn't take long for Pastor David to start showing signs of illness. At first, it was small, occasional coughs and fatigue, but it soon spiraled out of control. He became increasingly weak, his once commanding presence slipping away. church members whispered in hushed tones, speculating about his sudden decline. Lydia stood at the center of it all, observing the unraveling of the man who had once been untouchable. To everyone else, it was a mystery, but to her, it was a consequence of her calculated revenge. As David struggled with his health, he became desperate for answers. Some tried to comfort him, while others questioned his leadership. Lydia, ever the silent observer, watched as the powerful man who had manipulated so many now crumbled under the weight of his own sins. The church, once his kingdom, was beginning to see the cracks. Miriam had always trusted her husband, but lately, something didn't sit right. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Lydia. The secretary's closeness to Pastor David, the late-night meetings, and the sudden tension in their home, it all seemed too much to ignore. Miriam, once the picture of a dutiful pastor's wife, began to notice the small things: David's erratic behavior, his unexplained absences, and the cold distance between them. Her suspicions grew, and she decided to take matters into her own hands. Miriam hired a private investigator to follow Lydia and gather information. It wasn't long before the investigator uncovered startling evidence that confirmed her worst fears: Lydia had been more than just a secretary. As Miriam processed the shocking revelation, she realized her world was falling apart, and the betrayal went deeper than she could ever have imagined. The truth could only stay hidden for so long. One morning, the church was rocked by shocking revelations. Photos of Pastor David with Lydia began circulating online, followed by damning messages between the two, which were leaked to the press. As the scandal gained traction, other women came forward, sharing their own stories of manipulation and abuse at the hands of the once revered pastor. The elders of the church were caught off guard, scrambling to control the damage. Their efforts to downplay the situation were futile as public outrage grew. The church that had once been a beacon of hope now found itself in a storm of controversy. The faithful congregation was divided, with some choosing to stand by their pastor while others felt betrayed. Pastor David's actions were now out in the open, and the church had no choice but to confront the truth head-on. Lydia's world turned upside down when she was arrested and charged with knowingly transmitting HIV. The news spread like wildfire, leaving the community in shock. But Lydia wasn't ready to be the scapegoat. While in custody, she provided the authorities with hidden recordings and irrefutable evidence, messages, phone calls, and even video footage, that painted a very different picture. These recordings exposed Pastor David's manipulative behavior and the twisted games he had played, shifting the blame directly onto him. Lydia's motive for her actions became clear: revenge for the destruction he caused in her sister's life. As the details of the affair and the evidence unfolded, the public's perception shifted. Lydia, once seen as a villain, became a key witness in the unraveling of Pastor David's criminal behavior. The weight of his actions now became impossible to ignore. The courtroom was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation as Lydia's trial neared its end. Her lawyer, armed with undeniable evidence, dismantled Pastor David's image as a revered man of God. They presented a detailed pattern of manipulation, coercion, and abuse. Witness after witness, former victims of Pastor David, took the stand. Their testimonies painted a horrific picture of the pastor using his position of power to exploit and harm those who trusted him. Among the evidence were recordings Lydia had secretly gathered, revealing the pastor's predatory behavior. The defense made a powerful argument that Lydia, driven by the need to expose his sins, had acted out of a desire for justice rather than malice. The jury deliberated for mere hours before returning a verdict: Lydia was not guilty. As the courtroom erupted in applause, the reality of Pastor David's dark secrets began to unfold. Pastor David's fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. Once a respected leader, he now found himself stripped of his position, his church, and his followers. The congregation, once loyal, turned their backs on him, unable to reconcile the man they had trusted with the truth that had come to light. His wife, Miriam, filed for divorce, unable to cope with the betrayal. His reputation, once held high in the community, now lay in ruins as the media splashed his scandal across every news outlet. Lydia, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of her life. While she was acquitted, the battle had left her scarred. Though she walked free, the emotional toll was profound. Justice had been served, but for Lydia, the victory felt hollow. She was forever changed, carrying the weight of her past and the price of her revenge.